They're schemers. Schemers trying to control their little worlds. I'm not a schemer. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. And here we go.
Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you're all well on this freaking flipping Friday. You're looking absolutely amazing. Now, I'm going to get straight into the meat and potatoes, as this is video 2 of 3. We're going live later. The live that I had to keep moving, I do apologise. It's been a bit crazy around here. It's the summer holidays here in the UK, so that's made things a little bit more difficult than normal. Plus, I keep doing videos, and then I keep deleting them, which is fantastic. It's a new trick that I've learned somehow. But so this is the second time I've recorded this video. But anyway, let's get straight into it, because in order of being right and being proper, because I always sort of go on about and preach about being right and proper, I have to be right and I have to be proper, because if I don't, then what's the point? What's the point? This is about acknowledging things when they have to be acknowledged, and understanding that we have to take everything into consideration. And that is exactly why, for a long period of time, I was of a position where I said Bryan Kohberger has not been proven to be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and that stands. But there has been some developments in the aftermath of these documents. It's actually something that we was previously aware of, and even though that did get spun into something else, it has reared its head again, and it does need to be addressed, and it does need to be acknowledged. And if you are someone who believes that it shouldn't at least be acknowledged, I would then have to, at that stage, then be of a mindset perhaps we're not on the same page, where we're looking at everything and taking everything into consideration, because that is what I want to do. I will touch on it a bit more. Let's just listen to little man Enton here, where he is going to talk about what we're going to talk about in a second. And yeah, listen up.
This Bill Thompson, I've been trying to get an interview with him since before the sentencing, trying to set something up several times, and all my requests have been ignored. I'm not really sure why. He's done a lot of interviews with other national media, with local media, but for whatever reason, my requests have been ignored. I've actually...
Shall we answer that for him? So before we go on, shall we just answer this question, why Bill Thompson is not interested in speaking to News Nation? Because... or Bryan Enton, because he is an extension of News Nation, and for the vast majority of the Idaho 4 journey, if you like, they have been propagators of bollocks. That's what it all boils down to. Yes, he is doing interviews, but he's doing interviews with the likes of the Idaho Statesman, who haven't really... how can I say, they haven't really been the propagators of. They've spoken about certain things, but they haven't been the propagators of just vile lies that Bill Thompson has recently had to come out and do a rebuttal to and say, look, these things that have been said are simply not true. You know, we report on things, we talk about things, but 99.995% of the time, we're talking about things that are already out there. We are reacting to what is being put out there. And for a long period of time, you have the likes of News Nation who would put a report out and they would turn around. Let's not forget that it was News Nation were one of the first people to report that Xana Knodl's door was shut, for instance. And that was why Hunter was called over to help them get into the door, because someone was up against the door and they couldn't get in. Again, they have allowed to give Steve Gonsalves a platform where he has voiced a lot of things that have subsequently turned out to be untrue. So Bill Thompson probably isn't interested in speaking to him because they've caused so many problems. And maybe there is a situation here in the background where there was a doubt in Bill Thompson's mind as to whether he could take this to trial and get out the other side unscathed, and actually get justice if indeed Bryan Kohberger was guilty of this crime, which he's admitted to doing the crime. And however we feel about it, ultimately we have to consider they thought he was guilty, but they weren't willing to go to trial. And what was the reason they were unwilling to go to trial? And that is either they felt their case was weak, or there was enough out there to force some form of doubt on where that doubt come from. So look, he maybe in the back of his mind, he's pissed off that he couldn't get this to trial, and he's blaming social media. He's blaming the likes of News Nation, Court TV, Dateline, all of these people who were propagators of shit. Who knows? That's my take on it. But anyway, let's just talk about what he is going to say here. Some of you will already know. I've seen a couple of comments in it.
Interviewed him once early on, actually before the arrest, right after this all happened, before Kohberger was arrested, but I haven't been able to interview him since the sentencing. So I'm going to go off of Kevin's reporting with the Idaho Statesman. Again, he's a wonderful reporter, and he had this phone interview with Bill Thompson. And something really interesting that stood out to me is Thompson talked about these two ID cards that were found after Bryan Kohberger was arrested.
And you must remember, so this isn't a new thing. That's what I mean by this is something that we already knew about. But again, this was something that was twisted into something else. You know, many people, up to recently, I literally saw it, I believe it was on Facebook a couple of days ago. People were saying that Bryan Kohberger had identifications of the actual victims. That's where that came from. We saw the search warrant return, you know, what had actually been collected when Bryan Kohberger was arrested, and there was identification ID cards found, but it was left at that. We up to this point, we have been unsure who they belong to, with many, again, stating that they belong to actual victims, which that isn't the case, but listen to who they did belong to, apparently.
When they did the search warrant in Pennsylvania, they found two ID cards belonging to women, and I want to read you this. The two ID cards were of two women who were former co-workers or acquaintances of Kohberger from several years earlier, Thompson said. At least
the only thing that I'm querying here is co-workers or acquaintances. So you must know at this stage whether they were co-workers or they were acquaintances, unless one was a co-worker and one was an acquaintance. But that little bit of information there isn't clear, and you would think that that would be absolute. There would be absolute clarity there. We have two IDs. One belonged to an ex-co-worker. One was an acquaintance from somewhere else, or they were both co-workers or both acquaintances. That seems a little bit vague, but we'll touch on it at the end.
one of them was from when he worked at a part-time security officer at the Pleasant Valley School District. Kohberger graduated from the district's high school, and his parents previously worked for the district. Sorry, I don't have my glasses out here, so I can't see that well. Both of the individuals were contacted by investigators. Thompson told Kevin they don't know how Mr. Kohberger ended up with those items, and they had not been harmed or threatened or anything themselves, Thompson said. So that's interesting. We had heard about these IDs. There were some IDs listed on the initial evidence sheet that we were able to get our hands.
So we must acknowledge that this isn't something that's new. We are talking about something that goes way back to when Bryan Kohberger was actually arrested. So look, we will talk. We'll just hear this out. I'm only going to play a minute or so left, and also I will put the link to this video in the description of my video, so those of you who want to go and watch the entire video and watch the whole thing through, you please feel free to do that if you haven't already watched it or you're unfamiliar with it.
From the search warrant, but in terms of them actually being people who Kohberger worked with and females, why he had these IDs, how he got these IDs, we don't know. It, for some reason, reminded me of something that I reported on early on. After Kohberger's arrest, he had a neighbor, someone who lived close to him in Pullman, Washington, where he was living, obviously, when he was getting his PhD in criminology at Washington State University. Anyway, there was...
This is talking about the young lady with the cameras, and there was another one as well, which we'll touch on in a second. I don't know whether later on he will discuss that. Again, you'd have to head over and watch his video.
A woman who lived close to him who thought there was a burglary in the area, and Kohberger actually offered to put up security cameras for her and put the security reported on. And stick around because later in the podcast, I'll interview Bobby Chacon, who is a...
So, yeah. So what we learn from this is, look, we now technically have 3 different scenarios, situations that some of you will have remembered when me and JB Gunner did a live together. Now, obviously for JB Gunner and for many, it was the Amazon purchase of the K-Bar knife that threw the needle, and it was like, oh, he's definitely guilty. That's just too much. Do you know what I mean? But for me, I needed to see more about that. There was an easy explanation. You know, we've already seen documentation that's reflecting other people in the area who, you know, they buy K-Bar knives and sell K-Bar knives, you know what I mean? And to be fair, when you look at statistics, as I see so many people talking about K-Bar knife statistics and saying that they're so rare or nobody knows what they are, when in fact it's a multi-million dollar industry. You know, K-Bar themselves make several million in sales on this product each year, and with the sales going up, they actually anticipate exponential growth. So it's a little bit disingenuous to try and say to people that the K-Bar knife is some spurious thing that nobody really knows about and no one really buys it, and they're very, very specialized, and you know, it's if someone's got one of them, then ooh, do you know what I mean? But anyway, that's by the by. I always wanted to see that piece of information go into court and see the rebuttal, see how the defense handled it, because even though it looks bad, it would have been easy to explain away. So for me, I needed to see more. It wasn't enough to see it in Dateline or NBC. Do you know what I mean? So I think it would be, I think I was doing the right thing, you know, not just condemning the guy to potential death because Dateline tells me so. But there was something that is, how can I say? There was something that stood out to me, and it was regarding the Asian female. And she's this Asian female who was getting close to Bryan Kohberger. It sounded like she was potentially wanting a relationship, but he wasn't interested. Again, we're talking about, you know, this Dateline, NBC, whatever it was, this documentary. So you have to take it with a pinch of salt. But JB Gunner put it down to hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, because she would then go on to say in the aftermath of all this that she had something go missing. I believe it was a watch that went missing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a watch went missing, and the keys to her apartment would be in Bryan Kohberger's office. So she's got something that goes missing or moved, something like that, along those lines. And the only other person who potentially had access to her keys potentially was Bryan Kohberger. Then we have this situation with this other female who she feels that someone's getting into a property, and it just so happens to be Bryan Kohberger, who she goes to in order to assist her with surveillance. And then we have these 2 identifications that originally cropped up in the aforementioned search return, and we saw that they were on there. Again, it exploded into something different, you know, people saying that these identifications belong to victims of this crime, which that's not the case, but it's now saying that they were females who had connections to Bryan Kohberger, and even though there doesn't seem to be anything else apart from the fact that he was found to have their identifications, the fact that they haven't turned around and said, well, yes, there is a valid reason for it. Now, there could be a valid reason for it. You know, maybe he found them. Maybe he found the IDs and picked them up, put them in his pocket, and the rest is history. You know, I'm not going to automatically default to, because we find these identifications, it automatically makes him a killer. And, you know, but what I'm saying is this is a red flag. And a red flag you certainly can't ignore, because if you pair all of these other things together, the fact that there was a female on the peripheral of his life who things were happening to, and she then goes to Bryan to help her, then that shows that there's a relationship there, and there's an indicator that something is happening in her apartment. And then when you pair that with another female who is also connected to Bryan Kohberger, who is also saying the same thing about something happening in her apartment, and now you've got two other females that he has found to have their identifications, it would be disingenuous to say that that is not alarming, that there is not something that should at least be an eyebrow raised, a bushy eyebrow raised to it. Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to sit here. How disingenuous would it be for me to sit here and say that these things, when taken into consideration, don't make me consider the possibility that there's something going on with respect to Bryan Kohberger. It would be wrong, and I won't do it. And I know there's going to be some backlash from it. You know, there's going to be some people who potentially think that it's wrong to even bring it up. Again, what I will say is I'm categorically saying that I'm not these identifications. It doesn't mean that you automatically jump to IDs found, mass killer. I'm not. What I'm doing is I'm taking all of the information that we have and the little stories that we have, the little things that we've been told, where on their own they're not massively significant, but then when you put them together, they do become more significant. I know what people are going to say. They're going to say, but that's how circumstantial evidence works. And when you say that you've got his car in the area, you've got his phone situation, you've got the Amazon, this is all circumstantial evidence that builds up. My point being, with respect of his car, I've seen the pictures, I've seen the photographs, I've seen the video footage, and I can't tell that that's a white Hyundai Elantra. I don't. It just doesn't look like a Hyundai Elantra to me. It just looks like a white car that could be another color that shows up as white on that camera. There's no Bryan Kohberger in the picture. There's nothing that would indicate to me it's definitely him. Same with the phone information. The phone information, there is issues around the phone information because you've got the prosecution saying that elements of the phone data don't exist when we know they do. And we also have a situation where we was questioning the phone data and saying that it doesn't put him out the property, which everyone fucking argued with. And now you've got the lead prosecutor in the aftermath saying that we was right, that there is no phone data that places him anywhere near the property. They can't even commit to his phone being off. They say his phone appears to be off, but they don't know that it was off, just that it appeared to be off. And the question still has to come, why did he take his fucking phone with him? If he knew that he was going out to kill people, why even take your fucking phone? It makes no sense whatsoever. But there we go. I've done that to death. What I'm trying to do is fairly look at all the information that's coming out in the aftermath of Bryan Kohberger's plea, look at anything that ties back into things that we've already looked at, and ascertain whether they are indeed indicative of an innocence, of a guilt, of a connectiveness. And that's all I'm trying to do. And I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts and feelings. If you're someone who have heard this information previously, how did it make you feel? How did it make you think? What did you think? If this is the first time that you're actually hearing it, how do you feel about it? And just do it in an adult fashion. We're all adults here. We don't have to be pricks about it. Do you know what I mean? If it turns out that we're wrong, I'm still not going to feel bad about giving the guy the benefit of the doubt. I'm certainly not. And I'll never, ever convict anybody on the likes of things that I hear from Dateline or News Nation. Fuck off. If you want to do that, that's on you. That ain't on me. But anyway, love you all, and I'll speak to you all in a bit, live. Mwah.